Dr. G. Shanmugapriya. She is an architect and a landscape architect by training. She holds a PhD in design and planning from University of Colorado, Denver, USA. She has 20 years of teaching and research experience in the fields of architecture, landscape architecture, and planning. She has worked in many prestigious institutions including School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University, and College of Architecture and Planning, University of Colorado, Boulder, and Denver. She is currently a professor and a PG program coordinator in the Department of Architecture at Satyabama University. She has been selected as the best graduating student of Center for Environmental Planning and Technology in Landscape Architecture program for the year 1994 to 1995. She has also received the B.V. Bhagwat Memorial Award. Apart from all this, she is a fellow member of the Indian Society of Landscape Architects.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for BArch program. This is the 8th lecture to the course AR 6009 Landscape and Ecology. In this lecture, we will be discussing the contents of Unit 4 Site Planning and Unit 5 Landscaping of Functional Areas. Specifically, we will be discussing about two important topics today. One is site planning of campuses and then waterfront development. Under campus site planning, we will be discussing about characteristics of campuses, design determinants and components. Under waterfront development, we will first look at the significance of waterfronts in an urban setting, then discuss the water development process and then various strategies, and finally, we will discuss a case study. Now, we will start with campus site planning. Campus landscape is considered as the green environment that situates, serves and symbolizes higher education. In general, campuses are long lived and they are also complex and extensive. Because of this, in campuses it is possible to achieve environments of great richness and strong character. Due to this, campus site planning has certain unique characteristics. Unlike housing or other developments where you have same units getting repeated, in a campus the structural units are highly individualistic. For example, there will be classrooms, research labs and other kinds of labs, library, meeting rooms and recreational activities, and each of this requires a particular service and needs to be located in certain areas. And in a campus there are fluid and shifting set of activities, and these activities have many complex linkages, and these linkages may shift in a year or it may shift over a time period. Because of all this, campus site planning is unique. But when we are starting a site planning for a campus, first we need to understand the various requirements and then locate them in the site plan. It is important to locate the various activities and establish the various linkages that is required among these activities, and all this needs to be done in relation to the other factors in the site and in the surrounding. Next, we will discuss about the various design determinants. Design determinants are the broad factors and considerations that inform the design process and outcomes. Dober discusses or lists 17 different kinds of design determinants. They include factors such as climate, vegetation, environmental suitability, landform and terrain. These are all mostly natural factors, and there are also man-made factors such as architectural program, visual character and funds. All these factors influence the outcome of a campus site plan. So, first we will look at a few of these design determinants. We will start with climate. Climate affects the use of outdoor areas, siting of buildings and greenery. All this needs to be done carefully to mitigate harsh climatic conditions, and selection of vegetation is also influenced by the climate. So, we will discuss few design determinants such as climate, terrain and vegetation. Climate is an important design determinant because it affects the use of outdoor areas, siting of buildings and vegetation. This can be carefully arranged to mitigate the harsh environmental effects, and selection of vegetation also influenced by the climate. For example, in gentler climates it is possible to have large outdoor areas, outdoor terraces or lawns where social interaction can take place or an outdoor classroom can take place. which is not possible in other hotter climates. Selection of vegetation is also influenced by the climate. Trees and lawns were standard campus landscape till certain times. Now, with the awareness of sustainable landscapes, lawns are giving way to more native species. Landform is another important design determinant. The campus design, the master plan, is definitely influenced by the terrain. When there is a sloping terrain, three different approaches can be adopted. They are draping, flattening and insetting. In draping, buildings and open spaces are fitted into existing contours, whereas in flattening, existing contours are modified to highlight the building. Insetting approach blends the terrain and the building. Based on the analysis and of the design determinants, we can prepare master plans. What is a master plan? It is a preliminary plan showing proposed site development. Master plan often comprise site work that must be executed in different phases. We will look at few master plans. This is the proposed master plan for IIT Jodhpur. Here the master plan is influenced by the climatic conditions and the vernacular architecture of the region. This is the site plan of MIT campus in Boston. Here we can see that open spaces are defined by the buildings. Here is another master plan where we can see a prominent open space in the center and buildings are arranged around this open space and there are radiating roads. This is University of Guelph. Here you can see the red color indicates pedestrian pathways. So, there is a central core that gives importance to pedestrians and vehicular movement is outside. So, next we will discuss about landscape design components. There are 30 design components according to Dober. It starts from the site surrounding, perimeter, boundary marker to it goes to the detail of signages and seating. So, in this lecture we will just discuss few of these components under two broad headings. We will discuss about components such as gateways, campus roads and walks under campus movement or circulation systems, and then we will discuss about open spaces, heritage spaces and secondary spaces and tertiary spaces under open space networks. So, for discussing these components, we will take one master plan as a base. This is a University of Guelph master plan. So, we will keep this as a base and we will look at the different components as different layers on the master plan and how they all come together to make a memorable campus experience. So, in the master plan we can see there are prominent pedestrian areas and vehicular access. So, here the activity analysis shows that important instructional spaces and services are concentrated in the center and there are few that are distributed around the periphery, but mainly the core area has most of the instructional spaces and housing is distributed along the periphery, that is indicated in yellow. We are going to discuss landscape components under movement system. Movement system is essential for campuses to ensure people can move around in a campus efficiently. So, the movement system comprises of busy streets and small pedestrian walks. So, all this together forms a complex network. So, a movement system in a campus needs to support all kinds of movements. It should support pedestrians, cyclists and also motorized vehicles and transit system. So, for a user of a campus, he or she first traverses the surroundings, reaches the perimeter and identifies the gateway, then enters the campus and from that point onwards either drives to the parking and then from there walks to the desired building. So, all this during this particular process they encounter different landscape components. We will discuss few of those components. We will start with the gateways. So, in the University of Guelph there are 5 different gateways. Gateways mark the transition from the surrounding to the campus. They actually support the identity and image of the university, as we can see here. It also enhances the visitors experience and assist in wayfinding. So, here are some more examples for gateways. This is important for the sense of arrival, because the deployment of the buildings, landscape and movement patterns reinforces the sense of arrival. In a movement system, the next component is street network. As I already mentioned, it needs to accommodate all types of movements, motorized vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians. In general, street network is considered as a skeleton of the campus. Just like how a skeleton shapes the body, campus roads can be used to structure the entire campus design. So, street networks support placemaking, they enhance the larger open space network and address wayfinding issues. The next important component is pedestrian network. Again we see this as a different layer in University of Guelph campus plan. So, in general the campus landscape design should aim at providing a pedestrian friendly campus. The central core area can have direct pathways, it can be directly linked, continuous, free of conflicts with vehicles. Direct pathways are very important, otherwise the user will find the direct way, whereas around the periphery meandering pathways are acceptable. So, the street network and the pedestrian pathways, they are important element of the public realm in a campus, because they connect the open spaces and they hold the campus together. The campus pedestrian paths can take many different forms. It can be a tree lined walk like this or something like this, or it can be an open walk across the lawn. Pathways can also be under building overhangs or arcades. These design of these components are influenced by the climate. While designing the campus pathways, the system of hierarchy of paths can be used to regulate movement. The path width and the surface treatment can help inform the hierarchy depending on the number of people and the kind of use. We can see the different material surface treatment of the pathways. Again different surface treatment and different configuration of pathways. Sometimes the way pathways are used are also influenced by the technology. Next we will discuss about campus landscape spaces. Under this we will discuss three kinds of spaces: primary open spaces, secondary open spaces, tertiary open spaces. Open space network in a campus play an important role in shaping the campus experience. Open spaces also shape the development patterns of a campus, and they establish movement and wayfinding patterns. Again we are using the University of Guelph master plan. Here we can see different open spaces of different sizes and they are all interconnected. Generally a campus landscape design should seek to provide an interconnected hierarchy of green spaces. The hierarchy of green spaces will provide users with an opportunity for range of scales of gathering. So, based on the general role, function and hierarchy of the space within the larger network, open spaces can be divided into three types. It can be primary, iconic or heritage, or it can be secondary or tertiary. We will look at each of these spaces. We will start with primary space. Primary spaces have great visual and symbolic impact. One of the best known example is Louis Kahn Plaza in IIM Ahmedabad. The presence of such primary spaces define a memorable landscape experience. This is the plan of the campus where such primary spaces is defined by the buildings. Here is view from the Louis Kahn Plaza. Such primary spaces can be used for campus rituals such as convocation or other cultural events. We will look at some more examples for primary spaces. This is MIT campus, Boston. Here again the adjacent buildings frame the open spaces. This primary space is known as Killian Court. Here is a view of the Killian Court. Here the adjacent buildings frame. So, as a result the access to these buildings are also through this primary open space. Another view of the Killian Court. Often primary spaces have a very long history. As a result they are also known as heritage spaces. But even in newly constructed campuses, over time primary spaces can become heritage spaces and they can also act as green lungs. These primary spaces are considered as major setting for campus life. They can be used for conducting campus ceremonies and celebrations, for large gathering, or they can be used for social encounters, formal and informal meetings and discussions. They can also be used as outdoor classrooms if the weather permits. Primary spaces accommodates unstructured recreation and relaxation both alone or in groups. So, we can say that primary spaces in a campus leave a strong impression on the visitor. And generally when a campus has a very strong primary space, we can see the picture of such space in their brochures or in any other publications. Here is another example of a primary space, University of California, Irvine. It has a strong central space, circular space, and it is defined by the buildings. The second type is a secondary space. This is very similar to the primary space, but it does not have that much of symbolic importance. So, such spaces are also large and they can be used by the campus users. They are attractive and convenient. It can accommodate many different activities. The third type of space is the tertiary space. These are the spaces that are found very close to the building or in between buildings. Such spaces provide opportunity for quiet activities or certain smaller informal activities. Well, we discussed about open space networks, but to become a successful space, the detailing of the space is very important. For example, here we see the seating, but it is quite uninviting, but this kind of seating maybe does not allow much of interaction. In certain cases, the user can adapt and they can interact, whereas certain other detailing allows informal activities and interaction, and sometimes the interaction takes place because of the provision of certain elements in the landscape. So, we discussed about landscape components under two broad categories, one under movement system, the other open space network. All these different layers creates a system of encountered experience in a campus. So, before concluding about the campus landscape, I want to mention about the importance of sustainability. Sustainable campuses foster responsible natural resource environment. Sustainable practices such as stormwater management can be adapted in a campus. So, here we can see that swales in the sites are used to collect the rainwater. Recycled and locally produced materials can be used. Another important practice is water use. Landscape that require very little water can be established, and that can be achieved through xeriscaping or by minimizing lawn area. So, here we see that there is no lawn, instead native non-invasive drought tolerant trees and shrubs and ground covers are used. So, sustainable campus landscape are necessary not only to optimize limited resources, particularly in a campus, they can be used to educate the students, employees and the community. Very importantly, campus landscapes can serve as a testing ground for innovative sustainable practices. They can also serve as a demonstration area for the public. So, we have very briefly looked at various design determinants of campus landscapes and also discussed few landscape components. Next, we will discuss about waterfront development. Urban open spaces are important for a city. In this part of the lecture, we will discuss about design and development of waterfronts. In general, urban open spaces include publicly accessible open spaces such as parks, squares and plazas, streets, community gardens, greenways, urban wilderness and waterfronts. We will discuss about waterfronts. In general, before that we will look at the significance of the urban open space. Urban open spaces are necessary because they provide space needed for recreation in a city. They facilitate social contact and communication. They allow access to an experience of nature. They influence human physical and psychological health and well-being, and importantly they provide habitat for wild plants and animals, and they play a very important role in hydrological cycle of the city, particularly in stormwater management. So, of the different type of urban open spaces, we will discuss about waterfronts. What is a waterfront? This is where land and water meets. So, urban waterfront is defined as the dynamic area of cities and towns where land and water meet. Many cities are located near the water bodies, or they are developed or extend over the water bodies. We all know that ancient civilizations originated along the riverside mainly because it ensured water supply for drinking and irrigation, and also they were helpful in transportation. Whereas urbanization has changed many of the characteristics of waterfronts in many cities, and in many cases the transformation has led to the negative characters. So, waterfronts can play a significant role in building the image of the city. There are certain issues that needs to be addressed. One is flooding, the other one is pollution and water quality, and the third is soil erosion. So, waterfront development is considered as a complex process because it involves many different kind of stakeholders. They include government organizations, grassroots organization and different kind of community stakeholders. So, as a part of development process, the first step is understanding the waterfront conditions. So, we need to analyze various factors. We need to start with understanding of the evolution of waterfronts, that includes documentation of historic and current conditions, that is the various stages of development. Understanding the ecology of the water edge is very important. We need to understand the ecological dynamic of the waterfront, and the different transportation and connections needs to be identified. Identification of land use is important, because many successful waterfront developments have allowed different kinds of land uses to coexist. Other environmental factors such as soil conditions also need to be carried out. After the analysis, the water development process can start. The first step is community involvement. It needs to be done right at the beginning, because it is essential for developing a vision and strategy. Developing an acceptable vision and strategy for the entire community is important for the successful development of waterfronts. And the second step is preparation of remediation plan. This is carried out if it is required, depending on the toxicity of the land or the pollution level. Remediation levels can be determined. The next step is conceptual framework design. The main goal here is to arrive at an overall plan for the waterfront. After this, we can go into the detailed design. At this stage, specific program at site level are focused. So, through waterfront development process, waterfront can be transformed. But again, the process need not be uniform, because different waterfronts encourage different types of activities. For example, a riverfront, it promotes activities enhancing connections across the two river banks. Both physical and visual connections are important. Here we see a riverfront, the physical connections we can see here, and the visual connection is also important. The next type of waterfront is seafront. Here this is the land and here is the sea. So, here the land connects the urban fabric to activity nodes along the water. Here is an example for a seafront, where there is a connection to the city fabric. The third type is a lakefront. Wherever there is a lake or a reservoir, it can promote activities around the edge. There could be other points of interest and they can be connected. So, we looked at 4 different phases that are required for a waterfront development process, and it varies according to the waterfront type. Now, we will just look at few general strategies or principles that needs to be followed for any successful waterfront development. The first strategy is preserving the existing water body and protecting the health of the water body. This is an example for a successful restoration of urban section of the river. Another strategy is engaging the community and creating a shared community vision is essential for successful implementation of the waterfront development. In addition, while finalizing the use and activities, it is important to create multiple use destinations. So, various activities can strengthen each other and then such spots can become more popular. And after establishing or creating multiple use destination, we need to collect these destinations along the waterfront. Opportunity for public access needs to be provided as shown here, and such analysis is carried out in San Diego. We can see multiple use destinations established and those destinations are connected and public access is also maximized here. Whatever kind of development is proposed, it needs to be in harmony with the water system. For example, if there is a linear waterway, then the roads and the traffic ways needs to be parallel to the waterway. So, it is better to minimize the crisscrossing of roadways. It needs to be positioned where it is really required. And while designing the waterfront, one important consideration is flooding. So, if the waterfront is subjected to periodic flooding, then building should not be permitted above the projected 100-year flood level. Other facilities such as parklands, farms, fields, gardens and pathways can be located within the flood level, 100-year flood level. So, the next strategy is balancing environmental benefits with human needs. When there is a close connection between human need and the natural systems needs, then we can create successful waterfront developments. One of the successful riverfront development in India is Sabarmati riverfront. We will just look at some of the images of this riverfront development. This shows Ahmedabad and the Sabarmati river. These are some of the images of the riverfront development. We can see promenades at 2 different levels and public parks. So, with this we come to the end of this lecture. In this lecture we discussed about 2 important topics. One is campus site planning, the other one is waterfront development. Under campus site planning, we discussed about the unique characteristics of campuses, and we discussed about few design determinants, and we discussed about few important landscape components such as movement system and open space network. Then we discussed about waterfront development. We looked at the significance of urban open spaces. Then we looked at the general waterfront development process and discussed few strategies that can lead to successful waterfront development. Here are some questions that you will be able to answer based on this discussion. Define urban waterfront and list the types of waterfronts. Explain the various factors to be considered in the site planning and landscape design of institutional campuses. Discuss the various components of campus landscapes. Provide examples. Taking an example of a well-known waterfront development, explain the various aspects of landscape design and development of waterfront areas. Thank you.